really reacting and stuff. But we're getting all kinds of reactions online, which is great. So it's just great to have it coming out.
Excellent. I watched the film and I thought it was it kind of started off sort of like that teenage Scooby-Doo, but somehow it turned dark fairly quickly. So where the original idea came from for what we found?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Baltimore. That's where I grew up. I went to a public high school in Baltimore County, and I'd done some films. I like to write films that aren't in like New York or LA or like space. I like to write films so far anyway. Maybe I'll do a space film someday. But like to write films that are in like other areas, other places that aren't always represented on film. And I'd done other regions. I hadn't done where I grew up yet, Baltimore. And in 2015, my last film, Rising Tide, was coming out, and I got addicted, like half of America, to the Serial podcast. If you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
And that's right. And that was set in Baltimore County. Actually, the real events took place at the high school that was next to mine. I went to Catonsville, and Woodlawn is the high school where Serial took place. So the movie isn't based on Serial, but I was hearing, this podcast. I was sucked into that story. And I kind of thought, well, what if I wrote a murder mystery? And I was also looking as a filmmaker to try genre a little more. I'd done 2 indie character dramas and wanted to try genre. And I was like, what if I did a murder mystery because I was so inspired by, thinking about, not inspired, I mean, it's an awful story, but was really thinking about that kind of mystery taking place where I grew up. And I basically wrapped a coming of age story into this murder mystery genre. And, obviously some of it is obviously fictionalized, but then the coming of age stuff was a little more, autobiographical and taken from what it was like for me and my friends going to a public high school in Baltimore, being bullied, honestly, going off to the woods to escape. Those are all things that are from my childhood. So basically it was trying to write a genre story, which I think it delivers some of those genre thrills, but also, tell this heartfelt coming of age story that was similar to how I grew up. So that was kind of the genesis of it, I guess.
That's amazing because I do remember that podcast because I live here on the West Coast and I had a 5-hour drive to Las Vegas and totally listened to the podcast and I now recalling it and it was like sort of like a murder mystery with someone in the woods and all this kind of stuff. So you almost followed it, but not exactly, but kind of similarly, yeah.
Well, and it was a little bit too, because, obviously Serial, the big question is whether Adnan, killed his girlfriend or not. And so there's some similar threads in our movie. And I guess our movie was a little bit of a what if, like a different course that a similar type of story could have happened. So it's not based on Serial. Obviously, there's a little bit of the DNA of like Stand By Me in there and The Wire. It's similar to those kinds of that movie and that show. But yeah, and then it really became also with the friendship kind of a statement about friendship, about the time in our lives where we kind of separate from our parents and we make our own stands. That Marcus makes a very moral stand of like, my friend disappeared, something happened to her, I'm going to find out what happened to her. And he's at that age, the first time you kind of take a break from your, a separation from your parents and stand up for what you think is right. And that's kind of what the main theme was. And I think, I didn't confront criminal. I don't want to give anything away, but like I wasn't as brave as Marcus, but in my own ways, I think that period of my life was that was happening in that period of my life as well.
So tell me about the woods. What you said, this was near Baltimore, the forest, the woods. I mean, you described it as a park in the film, and me being on the West Coast, when because we're so urbanized over here, when we think of park, we think of like, grassland and a few trees, right. Or either that, or we think of Yosemite. But what are the environment of and how difficult it was to film in this park that you described?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a funny like East Coast, West Coast, like distinction or something. Because in Baltimore, well, actually, in Serial, the body there is discovered actually, I just forgot the name of the park. Sorry, I just forgot the name. But anyway, there are a lot of parks, and where I grew up is a place called Patapsco State Park near to me. And basically, in Baltimore, you have Baltimore City, you have Baltimore County, and then I guess just Maryland's great with the park system. There are these big, wooded parks that are I don't even know how many hundreds of acres, so it's the woods. It's huge. It's the kind of thing you can walk across for hours. So it's not like a little city park that's like 5 square blocks, and it's not Yosemite. It's just that. So that was where I grew, that was what I grew up with, and so that's why I kind of said it was a park. And actually, funny enough, in Serial, the body's also found in a city park, I think, or the city-county line. Anyway, so that's legitimate in that area. And then we actually shot the film. So we shot the film in Baltimore a few days. We also shot it in upstate New York for tax credit reasons, which is just, when you're financing an indie film, we couldn't get a tax credit in Maryland. We could get one in New York. So we did 4 days in Maryland to get some authentic Baltimore locations, and then shot like the high school interiors and even the woods up in New York, a lot of it. And so we actually shot that in a state park, which was smaller. Sadly, thanks so much. I think it was Dutchess County, New York, because we shot in like 3 counties. But they were great and let us have access to this park. And we were like firing off, fake guns. There was a lot going on. So they were great. And we actually shot, all that wood stuff in kind of what was a much smaller park than the real life one in Maryland, the Patapsco State Park. And just, use different angles and everything to try to make it all fit. And it wasn't too difficult, except 2 funny stories. One, there was this like muddy road to get up that we would bring the actors in like, in like a SUV up this like muddy kind of path that actually got us into the woods, which made it doable because we could, they could be back at Holding, we could drive in and they could get there. But then one day it rained and the mud had like sunken in, and it was just this horrific day of like basically trying to get the cars in until they got stuck, and then the actors had to like get out where the mud hole was and like walk up to the set. And another funny thing was just Jordan, who plays Marcus, is from New York City, from Manhattan. The kid had never really been like out in the woods, so all those nighttime scenes, all the footage where obviously we use the stuff where he's in character, but every time we called cut, he couldn't handle the bugs. So it's so funny to watch the outtakes, because every time we called cut, he's like, oh God, all these mosquitoes and everything. So we actually had to digitally, there was a mosquito on Oona's forehead in one scene that we had to digitally remove. So, whenever you shoot, because it was just sitting there like in this big emotional take, and there's this big mosquito like biting her on the head the whole time. So we had to like digitally like paint that out. So yeah, so shooting, anytime you're shooting not in like an air conditioned, location, things happen. But
as an indie filmmaker yourself, does this frustrate sometimes when the environment doesn't go your way?
Oh, I mean, it never goes your way. And the thing is, when you're Ridley Scott or whatever, and you have $100 million, you can kind of bend things to your will. But when you're an indie filmmaker, you really have to roll with it. We shot this movie. Here's what's great. We shot this movie in 18 days, which is not a lot. And we had minors, so we're only shooting like 10 hours a day. We shot it in 18. We did do 4 days of pickup, so 22 days to be fair totally. But yeah, we rolled with it. That opening scene where the 3 kids are on the blanket. Remember that scene? We shot that scene 3 times, because we shot it once and it started raining right when we started shooting it, and we set up like a not a whole tent, but like a tarp to try to block the rain. But it was so loud, the rain hitting the tarp was so loud that we couldn't use the sound, so didn't get it. Then like 4 days later, tried to get it again. And what was wrong with that version? I think it rained again, or anyway, something happened in that version. That version also didn't work. So eventually we finally got it in pickups. So yeah, I mean, when you're an indie filmmaker, you have to, basically you spend like a year and a half writing the script, trying to get everything perfect. And then you have this certain thing in your mind, and then the day comes and the location you wanted suddenly won't have you, and you're shooting it like somewhere else, and you have 2 hours to shoot it, and you just go for it. And the thing I say as a director is I try to have every scene have a heartbeat. So that's what it's all about for me, is even if you don't have, you picture 100 extras, well, you got 5. You picture this like amazing location, like this big, bank lobby or whatever, and now it's like in a tiny office, like 5 feet by 5 feet. But then there's an intention to the scene that you wrote it with, and a beat that's happening in the story. And as long as the actors are bringing what they bring, and they basically give it a heartbeat, bring it to life, then the other stuff is less important. I mean, it depends. I think, obviously audiences are used to, especially these days with Netflix spending $100 million on like everything, they're used to a certain level of, aesthetic. And so, yeah, on a lower budget film, we stretched every dollar. So it's hard to meet that $100 million aesthetic. But what I hope is there's a really genuine connection that the audience can find in an indie film, because it's not corporate controlled. It's storytellers telling stories. It's actors who are there because they love these roles, and they're doing it for the love of it. And so that's the quality I hope you get from an indie film is, yeah, not every location is what I wanted. Not every stunt is what, and the stunt coordinator did a great job. But again, when you have like an hour, it's you compromise on those things, but what you don't compromise on, hopefully, is the heartbeat, is the story and the characters connecting and the important moments that the audience connects with.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about the cast, especially
Sure.
particularly the cast of kids, because the biggest person that I seem to recognize was Oona Lawrence, and obviously, she's been acting for quite some time, and that's why she's highly recognizable. But could you talk about casting these kids and or how you discovered them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, Una's obviously well known. So we obviously didn't discover her. We did kind of discover Jordan. It was his first film. So basically, I worked with Barbara McCarthy and Alice Merlin, who are two fantastic casting directors here in LA. They cast a very wide net. I very much for the kids, the younger kids, we're obviously going after name actors for the adults. And for the teens as well, Brandon Larapente and Georgia Wiggum have both worked a decent amount. Now Brandon just starred in Party of Five, and Georgia was in The Punisher, Marvel's The Punisher on Netflix. So, but the kids, that was just about casting the best actors. And we had so many submissions for Holly, actually. And I don't know, there were like 6,000. We had a hard time finding Marcus because there just aren't. I mean, this is, one of the reasons I wrote, the lead role for a young African-American kid was in Baltimore, and Baltimore is like a 70% Black city. So and I grew up with a lot of, African-American, people and my high school kids. So it just, even though I'm a white filmmaker, it just made sense to have a Black person be a part of a Baltimore story. That was just kind of important to me. But also, it was, we were trying to, have a diverse film and create roles for different different types of people. And basically the interesting thing would be like 6,000 submissions for Holly and not that many for Marcus. So Marcus was really like, we were pushing so hard. Anyway, so Oona, so you asked about Oona. So in terms of casting Oona was easy because basically we had 6,000 submissions, but we had a number of like kind of experienced name actresses, and Oona was right at the top of the list. And I think we basically, I don't even know if she read. I think I knew her work. I'd seen some clips, and we did a nice Skype. We did like a phone call, and she immediately got it. And what I loved was she just wanted so much to she was so into being a badass. She was like, I love this, because she had read it. She was like, I love this character because she's a badass, and she kind of stands up for what is right, and she doesn't, she has this stuff going on with her parents, and she has kind of parents who are arguing, and a dad who's a little abusive. And it's obviously affecting her, and she's a human being, and she even talks to Marcus about some of those feelings. But in the end, she's this young, strong person who just has this confidence that comes from, I guess, street smart isn't exactly the word, but she has this confidence that comes from having real life experience in the world. And Oona just loved that. I think Oona just loved how badass she was. So basically we got on like a house on fire, and, we gave her the part, and that was like one of the easiest castings we had. Marcus was harder because, this is the lead of the film, and we actually weren't getting as many submissions. There weren't as many options. And so I just kept pushing Barbara and Alice to find more people, find more young African-American actors. And Jordan had been on Broadway, so he'd never done a film. The boy, I should have added like a scene where Marcus is singing in the shower or whatever. I should have added something because he's an amazing singer, but this wasn't a musical. So he had played like young Simba on Broadway, and he had done like all these kind of musical theater things. And the reason we cast him was, we had a few good auditions. Obviously, we got on, we did a Skype, I chatted with like the 4 top contenders and stuff. But basically he just kind of was this kid. He's a musical theater nerd, not a science nerd, but and I don't want to denigrate him by saying he's a nerd. He's a much cooler kid than Marcus in some ways, very fashionable, and the boy can dress. We actually had to dress him down and make his hair less cool than it was. But but he just had this warm energy, this curiosity, this intellectual curiosity that Marcus had. And so in the end, we cast him because he just kind of in some ways was this kid, and they kind of melded together. So yeah. And then Grant, we had a number. Yeah, it's basically with the kids, we had a lot of options, and then with the adults, it was more like we were trying to go after name actors to help sell the movie. and we were very lucky with who we got with like Elizabeth James and T-Day. I mean, T-Day is amazing in the movie, so I was blown away by her every day on set.
Ab-
Yeah,
ab-
sorry.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just curious. Did Una had to practice archery, or she already knew how to do that?
No, she did. We had an armorer who I don't know if this will go in the story, but it's a small thing. But I actually heard he died. I don't know what happened, so I don't know what happened to him. But I actually heard on Facebook like something might have happened to him, and I'm not fully informed. I just one of the crew members was posting something, so I was like like rest in peace. I don't know what happened. Anyway, but this guy Joe James was the armorer. And he brought the guns and he brought the bow, and basically he had like two bows. He had like a really like kind of more high-tech bow, and he had this simple like one, and he was like, well, she's 14, the character's like 14, 15, she'd have the simple one. So it was a very simple, whatever, concave, whatever they call it, bow. And Una had never touched one. So Joe gave her like 3 lessons on some basic stuff. And then the reason that was in there was not trying to be a Katniss Everdeen clone. It was because when I was a kid, I had a bow and arrow, and my friends and I had some bows and arrows because our parents would not let us near guns, wisely. But a bow and arrow was like a thing you could have, and and we used to go out in the woods a lot, and yeah, we'd go out in the woods and like had like some old piles of hay and would like shoot arrows into it. So that just came from our life, and that's what you have access to as a kid when you're trying to be like a woodsy kid. And anyway, so the thing where she has like a knife and a bow and arrow that was what I had as a kid. As well, what my friends and I had, and basically, so the final thing was I had done it too. So Joe gave her some lessons, and then when we were on set, I just gave her little tips, not really tips to actually like aim and shoot the arrow any more effectively, just tips to look cool. So like a lot of it was like you kind of press your body into it versus like the first thing you want to do is like pull back. But I was like, actually, it's almost like you're pressing forward on the bow part, and it's like this more fluid motion. And so like when we did this close up of her drawing it, I kept kind of giving her that direction, and yeah, and she loved it. So that was one of the when you're a kid doing a movie, I think you're into the character and all the hoity-toity, the high-minded stuff, and then also you're like, I get to run in the woods from like bad guys, and I get to have like a bow and arrow, like awesome. So I think she loved that part. But yeah.
So it seems like you really enjoyed doing like a murder mystery type of film. Is this the genre you like to do, or you do all kinds of things?
I would like to do all kinds of things. I mean, definitely in Hollywood, not that I'm even in Hollywood, I'm indie, but there's a pressure to kind of be one thing. And part of the reason I did this is I'd done 2 character dramas, and when I was kind of meeting with people, et cetera, they were like, oh, you're an indie drama guy. And I was like, no, I can do all sorts of things. And basically I wanted to try something different. I wanted to do a more commercial film. Obviously it has a heartbeat, and it has, characters that you care about. And that was important to me. And it has some messages in the film, but yeah, I wanted to make a fun movie, which I think is what we ended up, doing. That was the goal. And for me, it was great because when you have this established framework of, okay, well, it's a murder mystery, you need to hit certain beats, then the fun comes in using that framework, but then trying to play against expectations. And again, I don't want to spoil it, but if you remember the dog moment, what happens, so there are just moments where you try to set up a certain expectation, and then what you try to do is, as a writer, is you try to find something that's a twist on that. That's you have an audience expectation, you try to play against that and kind of surprise the audience, because that's part of the joy for the audience. So for me as a writer, it was very fun to play with the framework, to try to add some real character moments and themes that felt resonant and important. Obviously, there's it's small in there, but there's some themes about police, about what makes a good cop versus a bad cop, about having consequences for their actions. There are a few different themes that run through the movie. So as a writer, you try to get those things in there. We're also making a movie that is fun, and for me, this movie, sadly, because of COVID, I'm not really able to see it like in a theater with a big audience. But we did do test screenings, and we're getting online reactions now. And I think that's one of the things that I like about it is, compared to my other films, which people kind of said, oh, I was really moved by this, or like it was, an important story because of X, Y, or Z. This film's just fun. So I'm just getting reactions of like, oh, it was great. Like, I watched it with my my wife, or like with my mom, or, with my boyfriend or whatever. And like, and I'm getting all these reactions just like, they screamed at this part, they laughed at this part. And it's just, it's just a more fun movie. So for me, I'm actually writing a kind of science fiction thriller next, that actually focuses on climate change. And anyway, so I'm trying to do different things each time. I like as a filmmaker to not be known for one thing, but to be able to play in different sandboxes, for sure.
Excellent. Well, hey, I appreciate you speaking with me. I mean, I do have to admit the final scene was quite riveting and got me on the edge of the seat because seriously, I didn't know what you were going to do with those kids.
Yeah, yeah, you don't know. Again, no sport. I don't know what exactly you're gonna write, but yeah, no, yeah. You aren't. I'm just wondering what I should say about the ending. You aren't like putting this whole clip online, right? You're writing something.
No. I'm actually this is a video interview, but you don't have to reveal anything, so don't worry about it.
Okay, I won't. But all I was going to say was, yeah, we definitely put the kids in some situations that are rough, and I definitely think the audience goes like, what's going to happen? And hopefully that pays off in a really good way with the ending, and especially with Marcus's character. He again, I said one of the main things was him standing up for what's right and what he believes in. I think the ending's very much about that he takes a stand. There are consequences, and then yeah, the audience can see what happens.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you very much for speaking with me. I truly appreciate it, and hopefully more people get to watch it during this COVID times.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my pitch to audiences. I think it is a fun film. It's a fun escape, and it's a great film for kind of teenagers to watch with their parents. There's stuff in there for a 15-year-old and for like a 35-year-old. So yeah, I really hope people after all our work, the cast work and the crew's work, I just hope people check it out and enjoy it, and engage with us online. So yeah, so thanks a lot for taking the time to talk.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you, Ben, and hopefully we'll get to do this again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye then.